Hi, I'm Phil Nichols from the Department of Agriculture and Food in Western Australia, and I'm going to be talking about best bet legumes and grasses for low rainfall saltland pastures. So this presentation is likely to interest farmers in the low rainfall areas of southern Australia who want to make their saltland more productive, or even just to rehabilitate small areas of degraded land. So we're talking annual rainfall typically less than 400 millimetres. And although this information is focused on Western Australia, it's also applicable to similar environments in South Australia, Victoria and New South Wales. So what are some of the features of saline environments? Well, the most obvious one is the reduction in growth and survival of crop and pasture plants. And saline environments are often associated with winter waterlogging due to the rise of water tables close to the surface. And the effect of this waterlogging is that it makes the effect of salinity even greater. So the most hostile environments are those that have got salinity and waterlogging combined. Saltland is very spatially variable, and we've measured differences in salinity levels of tenfold within a metre in some situations. And the other thing about saline environments is that the surface salinity changes throughout the year, particularly so on sandy and sandy loam soils, although this variability is less once you get below 25 centimetres or so. And just to illustrate this, we've got here a graph that shows salinity levels up here on this axis here, measured as electrical conductivity units, for a site in Western Australia, and we're looking at salinity levels in the top 10 centimetres. And what you find here is that salinity levels are at maximum over summer and early autumn. We then get the opening rains to the season, and subsequent rains flush the salts from the surface of the soil to lower in the soil profile, so that by the time you get to midwinter, these environments, the salinity is at its least, and in many situations it's quite okay for growth of some plants. And then as soils dry out in spring and summer, salinity levels increase again. Now I'll talk a bit about pasture legumes for saltland, and the reason for our interest in them is that they lead to increased animal production. They've got good feed quality in themselves, high digestibility and protein levels, and of course their ability to fix atmospheric nitrogen means that other components in the pasture, the grasses and herbs, are also more productive. But most legumes are susceptible to salinity, and it means that saline areas tend to be quite nitrogen deficient. But economic studies have shown that if you can establish legumes into saltland pastures, it can have a marked effect on their profitability. But subterranean clover, it's the most widely sown annual legume in southern Australia. It's highly susceptible to salinity and one of the first plants to disappear once soils become saline. Now we set up a national trial series through the former Salinity CRC to identify legumes and grasses for saltland. So we targeted barley grass flats such as we've got here showing here, which are not economic for cropping. And it was quite an extensive study which involved 66 pasture legumes, both annual and perennial, and 19 grasses. We looked at their production and persistence over 3 to 4 years at 7 sites across southern Australia, of which 3 were in WA. Now I'm going to present some data for Tammin in the central wheat belt of WA, as it typifies many of the low rainfall sites that we like to encounter, and I'll use that in addition to some experience we've had from other sites, trial sites and demonstrations, and farmer experience to talk about some of the best options for low rainfall saltland pastures. Okay, a bit about the site. It's about 330 millimetres annual rainfall. It's a sandy clay loam, well drained, so salinity, so waterlogging is wasn't a factor at this site. Its summer salinity levels in the top 10 centimetres were we consider moderate to high, whereas in winter, midwinter, the levels drop down to quite low. So what we've got here on this graph is spring biomass, or the amount of feed produced during the season when we measured in late September for 3 different years. And the first thing you'll see is that Dalkeith subterranean clover, which is widely sown throughout the district, produced very little feed at all. It failed at that site. The Balansa clovers, Frontier and Paradana, produced moderate levels in the first year, but their performance was much poorer in the second and third years. Similarly for prolific and nitro plus Persian clovers, but the winners here were Scimitar and Cavalier Burmetics. At moderate levels in the first year, but quite good production levels for that environment in the second and third years. Caliph Barometic also performed reasonably well, but not as well as the Burmetics. And another species to note was Snailmetic, but its performance was less consistent than the Burmetics. And this just shows you here at this site in the second year, Scimitar Burmetic, productive plot there, got Frontier Balansa clover there, not nearly as productive, and you'll see quite a few empty plots where the species failed to survive the salinity over summer. So what about perennial legumes in this environment? Well, here we've got the performance of the Burmetics, or Scimitar in this case. Here are 2 lucens, Salado and Septar. Very little production in the first year, and they failed to persist after that. And similarly for Palestine strawberry clover. Now, to be fair, this is a tough environment for perennial legumes in any case, even on non-saline land, but it's clear that they're not really an option for salt land in this rainfall zone. What about perennial grasses? Again, here we've got Scimitar Burmetic compared to Dundas and Tyrrell tall wheatgrass, Menemon Puccinelia. Now, to be fair, Puccinelia is a species that requires waterlogging, and this was not a waterlogged site. We've got Sorrowland Phalaris and Fredo tall fescue, which all failed to really produce much in this environment. So what can we conclude from this study and from other experiences in similar types of environment? Well, we've confirmed that subclover is susceptible to salinity and won't persist in saline areas. The Burmetics perform very well, and we've done quite a lot of work in the glasshouse and laboratory to confirm that they've got quite good salinity tolerance. They won't tolerate prolonged waterlogging, but they will tolerate transient or intermittent waterlogging. The Burmetics prefer sandy loams to clay loams of moderate acidity to neutral pH. And the best cultivars that we've looked at are 2 new ones, Scimitar and Cavalier. Cavalier being for slightly higher rainfall. Serena Burmetics, an older one that's really suited to lower rainfall areas, but it doesn't have quite the salinity tolerance of Scimitar. San Diego is another Burmetic that could be considered. The Barometics have also got moderate salinity tolerance, but not quite as good as the Burmetics. They also don't tolerate waterlogged situations. They prefer heavier soils of higher pH than the Burmetics. And of the aphid-resistant cultivars, Caliph is suited to lower rainfall areas, and Jester for slightly higher rainfall areas. And it's interesting to note that if you look at some of the valley floors in the wheat belt that are subject to salinity, you still see quite a few burrs or plants of the older cultivar cypress, which have persisted over quite a few years. Okay, the Balansa and Persian clovers have got good waterlogging tolerance, but they don't have the salinity tolerance that the burmedics do. They are better than subclover, but really their level of tolerance is still quite low. They often perform well in the first year or in seasons following strong early season breaks, but they're unreliable, and often their persistence is poor on saline land. So really they're best suited to waterlogged soils with nil or low salinity levels. Now, of the Balansa clovers, Frontier is the only one suited to lower rainfall areas. Of the Persian clovers, Sardi Persian, Prolific and Nitro Plus are suited to medium areas really, rather than low rainfall areas. And there are some other cultivars available. So the other potential annual legumes for low rainfall areas are the snail medics. We've looked at Sava and Silver, potentially very productive, but they're less reliable than the burr and barrel medics. Orion's Fear medic is another one that we've seen may have some role, but we really haven't tested it to any great extent. In terms of the perennial grasses and legumes, they tend to struggle anyway in areas of less than 400 millimetres. Puxalia can have a role on waterlogged valley floors. It needs waterlogging really to perform, and it is the most highly salt tolerant and waterlogging tolerant of the commercially available grasses. Tall wheatgrass and lucerne may have a role in areas more than 350 millimetres, but only on sites that aren't waterlogged. Now, another species that has come onto the market recently is Testiculus. It's a highly salt and waterlogging tolerant grass. Nipa forage is the cultivar that's available, but its main issue is it can only be sown by runners. We can't produce seed of it, and so it's a much more expensive option than some of the others, and it's also slow to spread. So it's unlikely to be a viable option for broad acre situations, and is probably best suited to amenity and environmental improvements. In terms of the annual grasses, annual ryegrass is probably the best option for saltland pastures in low rainfall areas. It is in fact moderately salt tolerant and often invades from into mildly and moderately saline pastures from surrounding paddocks. Wimmer is the original cultivar, but a more recent one is Safeguard, which has some resistance to annual ryegrass toxicity. Now, I mentioned earlier that saline soils are very variable, so one of the best ways to counter this is sow mixtures of best bet species and cultivars. Burr medics are likely to form the basis for most low rainfall sites, but other species could be added. And here this picture just shows the situation at Lake Grace in the wheat belt of WA on a variable site. And you'll see down the bottom this slope here, you've got Puxalia and Balansa clover where it's waterlogged. A bit further up the slope is where tall wheatgrass and the burr medics come into the system, where it's still saline but not waterlogged. And further up the slope is actually arable land. You'll see the capeweed there. That's where subclover will grow, and it can also be cropped. So it just shows you how the different species will find their place in different parts of the landscape. So I've talked very briefly about some of the options. If you'd like to find out some more information, we've just published a new farm note talking about legumes and grasses for saltland, which you can download from the DAFWA website. And the Saltland Genie website has also got quite a lot of good information about potential options. So I'd like to thank you for listening, and I wish you all the best in improving your saltland pastures.